Okay, so you've sent us quite a collection of stuff here, articles, social media posts, all about this project 2025.
Yeah,
And it looks like you really want to dig into this and
absolutely.
go beyond just the headlines.
I think one of the things that really jumps out at you right off the bat is, President Trump,
Yeah.
newly elected President Trump, and his stance on Project 2025.
hmm
It seems like it's shifted quite a bit from what we heard during the campaign.
Yeah, for sure. During the campaign, he was like, I don't even know what that is. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's abysmal.
Right.
And then just recently, like in this Time magazine interview, he's like, oh, yeah, I've read enough about it. And some of it's very good, very conservative.
Yeah.
So is he just like, is this just a politician being a politician
Well, it's certainly generating a lot of buzz.
or is there something more there? And you even included some stuff from Reddit where people are like, was he really in the dark about this during the campaign or was he kind of downplaying it?
Yeah, and some users are saying they feel kind of gaslighted by,
Yeah.
by the shift in tone.
Yeah. So maybe to get to the bottom of this, we should start with what exactly is this Project 2025?
Well, it's a big document,
Yeah.
900-page policy document.
Yeah.
And it was created by the Heritage Foundation.
Okay, so the Heritage Foundation, for people who aren't familiar.
They're a very influential conservative think tank.
Yeah.
Very influential.
So what are they trying to do with this big old document?
Their stated goal is to drastically reshape the federal government.
Oh, okay.
So we're talking about potential changes to like everything from environmental regulations to social programs to
Wow. Okay, so that puts Trump's flip-flopping into perspective. He initially was like, no, I know nothing about that.
right.
I deliberately didn't read it so that I could deny it.
Exactly.
But I mean, how believable is that claim when you consider his history with the Heritage Foundation?
Well, that's a really good question, and I think you have to look back at his first term.
Yeah.
The Heritage Foundation says that a significant portion, 64% of their policy recommendations were implemented
Right.
in some form during Trump's first term.
So it seems like maybe he was aware of this project.
It does raise some eyebrows,
A little bit.
and it gets even more eyebrow-raising when you consider some of Trump's cabinet appointments.
Yeah, because there are quite a few people who are connected to Project 2025 who have been appointed to pretty prominent positions.
Yeah, there are. And actually, Russ Vought, he was nominated to return as director of the Office of Management and Budget.
So the OMB, and just for people who aren't familiar, what kind of power does that position have?
Oh, a lot.
Oh.
I mean, they control the federal government's budget,
Right.
and that means they have a huge influence on policy decisions.
So that's a big one, and that's the guy who wrote that section of Project 2025.
And he wrote the Project 2025 section on the OMB. So.
Wow. Are there any other notable figures that are connected to this who have been appointed?
Oh, yeah.
Give us a couple more.
So Brendan Carr, he was the author of the chapter on the FCC, Federal Communications Commission.
Okay.
And he is slated to lead that agency.
So it's not just like they're in the administration. It's like they're in these positions of power.
Right.
Okay, so we've got Vought, we've got Carr.
And you've also got Tom Hoseman, John Ratcliffe,
Okay.
Pete Hoekstra, Paul Atkins, Stephen Miller. All of them have ties to Project 2025, and they've been tapped for prominent positions as well.
So it's not just some dusty old document somewhere.
It seems like they might really try to put this into action.
Yeah, it seems like it's a little more than a coincidence at this point. And speaking of Russ Vought, his stated goals for Project 2025 are pretty ambitious,
They're ambitious.
to say the least. So what is he hoping to achieve?
Well, he seems to be very focused on expanding presidential authority
Okay, more power to the executive branch.
and potentially diminishing the power of the career civil servants.
Yeah.
There's a quote from his section of the document that I think is pretty revealing.
Yeah, what does he say?
He says, "The great challenge confronting a conservative president is the existential need for aggressive use of the vast powers of the executive branch to return power, including power currently held by the executive branch to the American people."
Interesting. So it's about centralizing that power, giving more power to the president. And you mentioned that there's a kind of concerning day one executive order that is proposed.
Yeah.
So what is that all about?
So this executive order would allow Trump to reclassify and potentially fire thousands of civil servants.
Wow.
And that would really shift the balance of power within the government.
That's a big one. And what are people saying about this executive order on Reddit?
Well, I think people are a little worried.
Yeah.
Some are worried about how it would affect the government's stability
Yeah.
and whether agencies would be able to function if that happened.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty drastic measure.
It is.
And it kind of makes you wonder, is Vought's vision for this really aligned with Trump's vision?
That's a really good question.
Or is there going to be some friction there?
And it's hard to say because they've both said things that seem to contradict each other.
Yeah, it's a complicated situation. And we've got this controversial policy agenda. The person who, wrote the book on it is in the position to put it into action.
Right.
No wonder people are freaking out. And, these Reddit comments you sent?
Yeah.
They are paying attention. People are definitely trying to figure this out.
Oh, yeah.
And some are even saying, hey, I feel like I was straight up lied to about this.
Yeah, and I think it's understandable that they feel that way.
Yeah.
There's definitely a sense of unease, when you see campaign promises clashing with post-election actions like that.
Yeah, so it seems like most people are like, this is not good.
Mm-hmm.
But are there people who are saying this is a good plan, this is a good idea?
Yeah, there are different perspectives on this.
Yeah.
We should consider those too. We saw an interesting take from John Feary. He's a Republican strategist.
Yeah.
And he expressed skepticism that Project 2025 would actually be a major driving force in Trump's second term.
Okay, so why does he think that?
Well, his argument is that Trump isn't really an ideologue
Okay.
and that he's appointed people with a range of views to his cabinet.
Yeah.
So Feary sees this as evidence that Project 2025 won't necessarily be the blueprint for Trump's agenda.
So maybe he'll pick and choose the stuff he likes.
Yeah, that seems to be his takeaway. But then on the other hand,
Yeah.
we have a very different view from Tony Kark. He's the executive director of this watchdog group called Accountable.us.
Okay.
And he thinks that Trump's cabinet appointments are a very clear sign that he plans to move forward with Project 2025.
Okay, and what leads him to that conclusion?
Well, Kark points to the appointments, and especially Vought's appointment,
Yeah.
as pretty strong evidence. And he even said, President-elect Trump has dropped all pretense and is charging ahead hand in hand with the right-wing industry players, shaping an agenda he denied for the whole campaign.
So there you have it, two totally different perspectives on this. One saying, it's probably not going to be that big of a deal, and the other saying, this is a big deal.
It's hard to know what to make of it all.
It is, and this is why these deep dives are so valuable.
Right.
Because we're not here to tell you what to think.
Yep.
We're here to give you all the information so you can come to your own conclusions.
Exactly.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about the potential impact of Project 2025. If this does become the driving force behind Trump's second term, how could this actually affect the average American?
Well, that's a really important question. And, Project 2025 does lay out some pretty significant changes to policy.
Yeah.
For example,
Yeah.
There are proposals to scale back environmental regulations.
Okay, and wouldn't that have a pretty significant impact on air and water quality?
Yeah, it could have a real impact.
And you mentioned social programs earlier.
Yes.
Could those be affected by this as well?
Absolutely. There are proposals within Project 2025 to restructure or even eliminate
Wow.
certain social safety net programs.
So that would affect things like healthcare and education.
It could affect access to healthcare, education, other
Yeah.
vital services.
So the stakes are pretty high.
Yeah, they are. And that's why it's so important to, stay informed and engage in these conversations.
Yeah, and going back to those Reddit comments, it's clear that people are really paying attention to this.
Yeah.
They're trying to make sense of it all. But I can imagine it feels pretty overwhelming for a lot of folks.
It's a lot to digest.
It is, and it's easy to get caught up in the political back and forth.
Yeah.
But we need to remember that these are policy decisions that are going to have a real-world impact.
They have real-world consequences for people.
Yeah, so what can people do to stay informed and make sure their voices are heard?
I think the most important thing is to stay informed.
Okay.
Read a variety of sources, not just the ones that confirm what you already believe.
Yeah.
And then get involved. Contact your elected officials.
Yeah.
Join advocacy groups. Participate in discussions like the ones we're having here.
Be an active participant, not just a passive observer.
Exactly. And remember, you don't have to be a policy expert to make a difference.
Yeah, everyone's voice counts. This has been a really great discussion. We've gone over a lot, starting with Trump's back and forth on this to the potential impacts on everyday Americans. I think there's one big question that we still need to answer. Is Project 2025 actually a genuine attempt to make the government better, to empower citizens? Or is it more like a power grab masquerading as reform?
That's a question that everyone has to answer for themselves based on the information that
Yeah.
we've discussed today. And it's a question that's going to continue to be debated as this thing rolls out.
we've given you a lot to think about, but this isn't the end of the story.
There's always more to explore.
Right.
Remember, informed citizens are empowered citizens.
Yeah, keep digging.
Keep questioning, and most importantly, don't stop thinking for yourself.
It's understandable that they'd feel that way.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of like bait and switch kind of thing.
It does make you feel a little uneasy.
It does, yeah. So it seems like most people are saying, red flag, red flag. But are there people out there who are saying like, no, this is a good plan. This is what we need?
Well, there are always different perspectives.
Yeah.
And it's important to consider all of them. We did find an interesting take from John Fury.
Okay.
He's a Republican strategist, and he's pretty skeptical that Project 2025 will actually be a major driving force in Trump's second term.
Oh, okay. So why does he think that?
Well, his argument is that, Trump isn't really driven by ideology.
Okay.
And he points to the fact that Trump has appointed people with a range of views to his cabinet.
Yeah, he's not afraid to shake things up.
Right. And so Ferry sees this as evidence that, Project 2025 won't necessarily be like the blueprint for Trump's agenda.
So maybe he'll just like cherry pick the parts he likes.
Yeah, that seems to be his takeaway.
But then, on the other hand, we have a totally different perspective from Tony Kark.
Right.
He's the executive director of accountable.us.
Yeah, it's a watchdog group.
Okay.
And he believes that these cabinet appointments are a very clear sign that Trump's going to move forward with Project 2025.
Okay, so what makes him think that?
Well, he's looking at these appointments, and especially Vaught's appointment, as pretty strong evidence.
Right.
And he actually said, President-elect Trump has dropped all pretense and is charging ahead, hand in hand, with the right-wing industry players, shaping an agenda he denied for the whole campaign.
Wow. So on one hand, we have this person saying, it's probably not going to be a big deal.
Right.
And on the other hand, we have, alarms going off.
Right. It's like, this is a big deal.
Yeah. So what do we make of all this?
It is hard to know.
It is.
I think that's why this deep dive is so valuable.
Yeah.
We're not here to tell you what to think. We're just trying to give you the information so that you can draw your own conclusions.
Exactly. So let's kind of shift gears a bit and talk about what this could actually look like. Assuming Project 2025 really does become the playbook for Trump's second term, how could this actually affect like the average person?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. And, Project 2025 lays out some pretty big changes to policy.
Yeah.
For example, there are proposals to scale back environmental regulations.
Okay. And wouldn't that have a pretty big impact on like our air and water?
It could have a real impact on air and water quality.
Yeah. And we talked about social programs before.
Yes.
Would those be on the chopping block too?
Absolutely. I mean, there's some pretty radical proposals in Project 2025 to restructure or even eliminate certain social safety net programs.
And so what would that look like for people?
Well, access to health care,
Yeah.
education, other vital services.
But the stakes are pretty high.
Yeah, they are. And that's why it's so important for people to stay informed and, be part of these conversations.
Yeah. And looking back at those Reddit comments, it's clear that people are paying attention.
Oh, yeah.
They're trying to understand what's going on, but it must feel overwhelming.
Oh, it's a lot to process.
It is.
For sure.
Yeah. And it's so easy to get swept up in the, political drama of it all.
It is. But we have to remember that these policy decisions, they're not just abstract ideas.
Right.
They actually affect people's lives.
They do.
In really significant ways.
So what can people do to, stay informed and make sure their voices are heard?
Well, I think the first and most important thing is just to stay informed.
Okay.
Read a variety of sources. Don't just read, things that you agree with.
Yeah, get outside that echo chamber.
Exactly. And then get involved.
Yeah.
Contact your elected officials. Join advocacy groups.
Yeah.
Participate in discussions like the ones that we're having here.
Yeah, be an active participant.
Exactly. And remember, you don't have to be, a policy wonk to make a difference.
Everyone has a voice, and that's important.
That's right.
This has been a really great discussion. We've talked about Trump's kind of changing views on this whole thing. We've talked about the potential impact on everyday people. I think, the big question that remains is Project 2025 a real attempt to make things better?
Yeah.
Or is this just a power grab dressed up as reform?
I think that's a question that each individual has to grapple with.
Yeah.
Based on the evidence we've discussed today.
And it's a question that we're going to keep asking as this unfolds.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've given you a lot to think about.
We have.
But there's always more to explore.
Absolutely. There's always more to explore.
Yeah.
Informed citizens are empowered citizens.
That's right. So keep digging.
Keep questioning, and most importantly, don't stop thinking for yourself.
So we've really gone deep on this project, 2025.
Yeah, we have.
Explored where it came from, what it could mean, who's behind it.
We've seen how much discussion it's generated,
Yeah.
how much concern it's generated, especially around President Trump's, apparent about-face.
Yeah, and those Reddit discussions you shared really highlighted just
Yeah.
how much this is resonating with people.
Yeah, and a lot of them were feeling like they were misled
Yeah.
during the campaign.
And it really underscores how we all have to be really careful, like really critical thinkers.
We can't just accept things at face value.
Yeah.
We really have to dig deeper, question things, consider all sides of the story.
And that's exactly what we've tried to do today.
Exactly.
We haven't shied away from the difficult parts of this conversation.
We want to make sure that you have the tools, the information
Yeah.
you need to form your own conclusions about Project 2025.
Because ultimately, it's up to each individual to decide
Right.
what they think about this.
We've heard arguments from people who see it as like a bold vision for the future,
Yeah.
and then others who see it as a real threat.
Yeah, and I think that question of whether Project 2025 is a good thing or a bad thing.
That's a question that's going to continue to be debated,
Yeah.
as we see this all play out.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we really encourage you to stay curious, stay informed.
Stay engaged.
Yeah, because ultimately the future is shaped by people who participate.
One of the best ways to make sure you're not being manipulated
Yeah.
is to be an active, informed, critical thinker.
Well, this has been a fascinating look at Project 2025.
It has.
And hopefully, we've given you the information you need
Yeah, solid foundation.
to really understand this complex and always changing situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep that conversation going.
Thanks for joining us.